In 2012, there was a popular movie that came out that grossed around $700 million worldwide. It's called The Hunger Games. The Hunger Games is this dystopian-style movie where you never really know what's going to come next. People are fighting for their lives and survival, all the while, all of this chaos going on, and people are watching this televised battle that's happening. It's a pretty weird movie, to be honest. And although we're not living in such a way in our world where I think, although how many know that they can lie all they want, they're listening to us. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Like, how do they know what I was thinking? I didn't say it, but it's now an ad on my phone. We're not living in such a dystopian world where people are fighting for survival in that way, but it can feel very dystopian. It can feel chaotic, that people are taking sides, and it can feel like culture is eating itself from the inside out. It feels like that in our world today with everything that we see that is happening around us. And so the question becomes, how did we get here? How do we get to a place in our culture and in our world where there's so much chaos and division, where what used to be just human decency is no longer even a part of many people's lives anymore? How did we get to a place like that? And more importantly, I think for us as followers of Jesus, how do we navigate it? How do we navigate a season like this where it feels so chaotic in our world? And so this is the conversation that we're going to be having over the next 5 weeks. And I think it's going to be crucial for us in equipping our church family into how to have good, honest conversations with people that you may disagree with. Although that there are people in this world that think the loudest person always wins in the conversation, and it's not even about winning, but it's about having civil discourse and conversations with people and being equipped to have these kinds of conversations. It's important for this cultural moment that we live in. My wife and I, Lindsay, we were in London with a group of pastors last fall, and this series is based off of one of the talks that the pastor, Johnny Hughes, gave. He's a pastor in London and gave this talk. And for the last year, I've been stewing and praying over this idea because it was so impactful to me to be under that teaching. And so we're going to be talking about what this has to do with our world today. And so a lot of what we're dealing with today comes down to worldview. Worldview. You may have heard that phrase or that word before. We're going to be comparing a biblical worldview and a secular worldview. Now, I want to give another disclaimer here. This does not mean that we're going to cover every single topic of a secular worldview or a biblical worldview, but we're giving you an understanding to be able to grasp and put some handlebars on the conversation, so to speak. So we're gonna show a couple of slides here what a biblical worldview is, and then we'll compare it with a secular worldview. The biblical worldview says there is a God. That's the foundational piece of a biblical worldview. We trust and believe that there is a God, creator of the universe, that has sent his son Jesus to this earth to die for us so that we could have life to its fullest and life in eternity. Secondly is that God is at the center of the universe. That we do not live unto ourselves, but God is the center. The third is that the highest form of love is agape love. The highest form of love is agape love. The fourth one, that the love of God is the key to human flourishing. And then lastly, submitting our desires to the will of God is central to Christian worship. This is a broad understanding of a biblical worldview. Now I'm going to show you what the secular worldview would say. Number one, that there is no God. There is no God. This is the foundation for both of them, because beyond this first level, you will see that the rest of what we believe about the first level informs what we believe about the other four levels. The second thing is that we are at the center of our own universe. We are the center of our own universe. I can still hear my dad kind of reminding me of that. We don't live in your world, Derek. We are the center of our own universe. The third thing is that the highest form of love is eros, which is where we get the word erotic. The fourth one, sexual fulfillment is the key to human flourishing. And then lastly, freedom to express our sexual desire is a basic human right. Now, these foundational blocks build off of one another, and we're going to spend the next 5 weeks looking at these. And so today we're looking at the first block of worldviews, that there is a God or there is no God. There is a God or there is no God. Look at John chapter 1 with me this morning. We're going to read the first 3 verses of John, the Gospel of John, in chapter 1. It says this: "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him not anything was made, not anything made that was." I cannot talk this morning. I apologize. I'm used to preaching at 10 o'clock, so y'all just give me a break here. "And without him was not anything made that was made." John is giving us this idea about the person of Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, that Jesus has been there from the beginning. The Gospel of John is unique in the Gospels. It's not a part of the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John kind of stands on its own, and it is so Christ-centered or Christocentric because he says it at the end of his book. I write these things so that you may believe in the person and the work of Jesus. I write these things so that you will believe in Jesus. And Jesus has, according to John, been there since the beginning of time, that in the beginning was the Word, who is Jesus, and the Word was with God. Jesus was with God, and the Word was God. This is the Word of God in flesh in the person of Jesus. Now, philosophers have been debating for thousands and thousands of years on the idea of a creator or a God or some kind of deity, right? Like this is not something that is new, but well before the time of Jesus, debates were the way of sharpening thought. You were to even in the first century time of the Jews, they would stand up in the synagogue and they would read the scripture, and then people would stand up and they would debate back and forth and sharpen one another in their thought and their theology. Aristotle is famous for his school of philosophy. You had Aristotle, Socrates, and many other brilliant minds that shaped the way that we do education today. I mean, this is 6 centuries before the time of Jesus that this is taking place in the Greek world. So this conversation that we're having this morning is not a new conversation of does God actually exist, and do we really believe that he is who he says that he is? This is not a new conversation. Now, fast forward to the time of Jesus. In the Gospel of John here, Luc Ferry, a French philosopher who is not even a believer in Jesus, says about this passage, this is what he says, is that this one passage in John was a turning point in the history of thought and education. A turning point in the history of thought and education, to say that Jesus was the Word, he was with God, and he is God, and he was there in the beginning. Now, for the Greeks, they had a way of thinking about this world. The world had a rational and a moral order to it. The world had a rational and a moral order to it. Now, you fast forward to our time, and it's like people start to believe that there is no moral order. You guys feel and sense that? To where morality becomes a moving target, and whatever you think morality is that's what it is. It just, there's no one that ever really set that for us before. The word that the Greeks would use to describe this moral order was the word logos, or some people use the pronunciation logos. This is a Greek word that is kind of like, you can pronounce it either way. It's kind of tomato, or pecan, or pecan. I grew up in Florida, and we pee in cans. Some of you will get that later. I bring this up because John was very intentional with his choice of words as he's writing these first couple of verses in his gospel account. Look at verse 1. He says, "In the beginning was the Word." And John uses this word logos or logos here when he says, in the beginning was logos, the word. He is tying this idea of Jesus being there from the beginning to the idea of the Greeks that meant that this world had a moral and a rational order to it. And so what John is saying is like, listen, this is so important. I want you to get this. He's trying to get the attention of the critical thinkers of the time of Jesus. You know, we can kind of read past that and kind of breeze past it, but to the first century Jew, to the first century critical thinker, maybe coming from this Greco-Roman world, this would have been a record-scratching stopping point. Like, wait, hold on a second. You said Jesus is the moral and rational order of our world? That doesn't, no, there's a rational order and there's a moral order, but it can't be what you're saying. John, the beloved disciple, knows that the Greeks have what is called a telos, which is a purpose or a meaning for life. A purpose or a meaning for life. We all know the old question. What is the meaning of life? I think we all come to a place of ourselves at different seasons and different stages of our lives, and we will have to wrestle with that question. What is the purpose and the meaning of this life that we live? Surely it's not to have a large number of commas in our 401k. Surely it's not just to be able to retire at a certain age or to have the most amount of toys and possessions. There's got to be something more in this world that we are living for. Everyone is faced with this question. For Greek philosophy, the telos would be intellectual achievement. If I can become more intellectual and have more knowledge and more understanding, then I will reach this place of understanding that's going to propel me to understand what the meaning of life is. But what John is declaring here is that the telos, the meaning of life, is not just intellectual pursuit, but that it is in a person, and his name is Jesus. And he's saying, it is in Jesus that you find your meaning. It is in the person and the work of the one that was going to be crucified on the cross for the people that were people of this time, the one that was going to be crucified on the cross. That is the one that you get your purpose and your meaning from, not from your intellectual achievements. It's a person. It's the word, the logos, who is approachable and available, and he's inviting us to join him. Now, you may be way more intellectual than me, but I have friends that they like to read books that are boring. Anybody have those friends? They hand you a book like, hey, you should read this book. It's a really tough read. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I will not. Give me a good story, great. Kind of mix it up a little bit, change it up, but I'm not reading a boring book. But in the Greek world, if you didn't have this intellect, you were seen as somebody that could never achieve the meaning for life. John is bringing it down to a level, and he's saying, no, it's not about your intellectual achievements. It's about the person of Jesus, and he's approachable. He will give you that meaning. Listen to what G.K. Chesterton said. He said, wherever the people do not believe in something beyond this world, they will worship the world. But above all, they will worship the strongest thing in the world. There's so much application to what Chesterton said here, because we are experiencing a lot of that today in our world, where people are amazed by themselves. They worship their self and they worship their desires. The worship of celebrities or politics. Humans in our nature are worshipful beings. Every Sunday, temples are filled across America where men, grown men, paint their bodies and scream like little children as other men throw around an inflated ball around on grass. You ever see the people that's got like the spikes on their shoulder pad? And they're beating on the front of the thing? I always wonder, I'm like, what do you do for a day job? Or do they let you out of the institution early on Sundays? People live for the next drop of some Taylor Swift song or album. In my mind, Taylor's still singing about Tim McGraw. What Chesterton is getting at is that humans are going to worship something. It's going to be something temporal, or it's going to be something transcendent, but they will worship. Humans in our nature are going to worship. It's up to us what we are worshiping. And I want to spend a few moments this morning covering a couple of areas where I see a lot of pushback when it comes to God. Where I see a lot of pushback when it comes to belief in God and who he is. And so when you're sitting down with your unbelieving friends, and our prayer is that you do have unbelieving friends in your life, that you have not simply surrounded yourself in a cocoon of Christianity to where no one will ever challenge your beliefs or your thoughts. You should be having people at your table or in your life that don't know Christ, that you are praying for and pursuing Christ for them, that God would rescue them. But when you're engaging in that kind of conversation, some of these points may come up. Number one is this, is that religion is intellectually inferior. Not many people will say this bluntly or out loud, but it's the belief of many people. Religion is intellectually inferior. You can't believe in Jesus and science, can you? You can't be serious about facts and data and believe in God. You may have heard some conversations like that. The NIH, or the National Library of Medicine, conducted a study years ago, and they studied this data, and they came to this conclusion that there is a significant negative association between intelligence and religiosity. It says there is a significant negative association between intelligence and religiosity. So I hear that and I'm like, are we dumb? Did I miss some train of intellect and knowledge and wisdom? Later on, many found the questions they were asking, and they revealed that the questions were slanted toward the answer that the team wanted. But let's sit with that for a moment. How does that make you feel? Are we unintelligent to believe in a creator of the universe that would send his son to this world to die for our sins? Is that unintelligent? That's right, Kai, it's not. This is the assumption of many, but not all unbelievers. Nietzsche said it this way, is that Christianity was from the beginning essentially a fundamentally life's nausea and disgust with life, merely concealed behind, masked behind, dressed up as faith in another or a better life. This is a thought of many brilliant thinkers of our time and times before. But the idea of knowledge and learning can be complicated. I think that many people come to this conclusion that we have no bias in our thought processes, and we have put on a lab coat, and we have come to these conclusions on our own, and we are the first person in the history of the world to come to these conclusions on our own. But all of us are interpreting data, not with a blank slate, but with a worldview. And we take the information that's available to us and we interpret that data with the lens of this worldview. Let me give you an example. 500 years ago, for you to say, I do not believe in at least a God or some kind of deity would have been unthinkable. In fact, Charles Taylor, who wrote the book Secular Age, said that someone not believing in God 500 years ago would be the equivalent of today someone believing in unicorns. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Of course we know unicorns are not real, mostly. Sorry, kids. The ones on your wall are real. Okay. But the ancient world, there was always a premise of something greater than humanity. A creator, a sustainer. But now we live in what Charles Taylor describes as a supernova. Is that most of the young people in America today have grown up in the age of the internet. They have no clue what the dial-up sound is. They don't know what it's like to receive a text message 2 days later just for no reason. Did anybody have the two-way radio phones? I had the Nextel phone, and me and my friends thought we were the coolest people in the world. We were truck drivers, communicating back and forth. Like this next generation has grown up in the age of the internet. And from the dawn of the internet, we've had to interpret data every single day. In fact, the term to Google became a verb, and in 2006, Merriam-Webster identified it and recognized it as a verb, Googling. You ask a millennial or older if they would have believed that there would be a term called Googling in 20 years, they would have said, we don't even know what that means. Now we have ChatGPT and all these other resources at our disposal. And listen, I love the internet. I enjoy the convenience of AI. I know it scares some people, and it probably should, but it hasn't necessarily made us smarter. Social media is very well proof of that, isn't it? We live with so much pride in our modern age, thinking that subconsciously that we're smarter than the ancient world. Oh, well, they just didn't know what we know. I'm like, you're talking about people that created what we know as science without a computer. These are brilliant minds. They were not unintelligent people. But there's this wrestling that goes on, this idea of truth. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 14 and 16. The natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are folly to him. And he is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned. The spiritual person judges all things, but is himself to be judged by no one. For who has understood the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? But we, as followers of Jesus, have the very mind of Christ. A wrestling. Paul, writing thousands of years ago, notices what we are seeing today. There's a wrestling with understanding the spiritual things and the natural things. The spiritual things and the natural things. The spiritual things are folly to the natural person. One great example of this is a man named Clive Staples Lewis. You may know him as C.S. Lewis. For a good chunk of his life was an atheist in pursuit of intellectual ascent and achievement, passing it on to the next generation. He was in Oxford, considered to be one of the places of the brilliant minds of our day and of the days before. Was a professor at Oxford University, and one of his colleagues, a believer, was named J.R.R. Tolkien. You may have heard of him before. I want to show you a picture this morning. This is a pub, and if you've ever been to England or London, you know that there is a pub on every corner. And the Eagle and the Child is where C.S. Lewis and Tolkien would sit with other groups of authors and bright thinkers, and they had this little group called the Inklings. I think it's a pretty cool name, the Inklings. And they would debate and talk back and forth. They would talk about their books that are to come, and think about Tolkien and Lewis and all the incredible works of literature that it came out of just those two minds sitting at this very pub discussing. Lewis could not predict his coming of faith. After some time, Lewis described his conversion to Christianity like this. He said, "It was like a man, after a long sleep, still lying motionless in bed, becomes aware that he is now awake." He didn't search to become a Christian. It found him. Listen to what Lewis said again. "I could not ignore the steady, unrelenting approach of him who I so earnestly desired not to meet." I'm too bright. I have too much intellect. I have too much knowledge. I can't get to that place yet. We see over and over and over beautiful minds that are coming to know Christ. We're starting to see a wave of this in our time. The creator of Wikipedia recently gave his life to the Lord. Now, you can say whatever you want about Wikipedia. All I know is this is the first thing that pops up on Google. That's it. That's all I know. It gives you like the birth and the date, birthday and the death date of people, and you're like, that's helpful information. Ayan Hirsi Ali, who was a prominent member of the New Atheist group, recently gave her life to the Lord, grew up in a Muslim household. Kirster Renard, former atheist and Scottish physicist. Some really bright minds. You look into history of science, and some of the brightest minds of science were believers in the creator of the universe. So I don't believe that intellect is the issue. The second thing, what about evil and suffering? What about suffering and evil? I think of all the topics that we could bring up, this is probably at the top of the list of why people have a hard time understanding and grasping who Jesus is. If God is good, then why does he allow suffering and evil to happen to good people? Well, there's an assumption there, first of all, for us to believe that we are good people. Humanity has a proven track record of not being trustworthy, of being a good person, being a good people. There is evil all around us. I mean, this is the pride that we can live with sometimes. But if you're a follower of Jesus, here's what I would encourage you with. You have to give evil and suffering a fair shake to people that are walking through really difficult things. The temptation for many believers is to give a church saying something along the lines, they're walking through something really difficult, and you say, well, everything happens for a reason. Not helpful. You know that feeling when somebody gives you a church line and you're like, you could have just been quiet. That would have been helpful. We can't just give these bypassing church lines and think that's enough. We have to give it great thought and understanding. There are real challenging problems in our world that we have to wrestle with. A child diagnosed with cancer. Children across the globe dying from malnutrition. A drunk driver taking out a set of parents, leaving a child orphaned. An island being wiped out by a tsunami. These are just a few of the really hard issues that we face in our broken world. So how can a good God allow bad things to happen? Here's part of the issue is that Keller talks about this in his book, The Reason for God. If you've not read it, it's an incredible book. He was talking about C.S. Lewis, and he said there's a really big assumption by humanity here is that we believe as humans that we deserve to live a life without suffering and evil. That is the assumption that we have as humans. Like, I should be able to live my life without suffering and evil. I mean, it sounds nice on the surface, doesn't it? That would be great to not have suffering and evil. But the reality is that we want to be the God of our own universe, controlling everything around us. We don't get to do that. Philosophers and bright minds have worked for centuries trying to disprove God because of evil and suffering. Many have said if we just do away with religion, it will solve all of the issues relating to suffering and evil. In fact, let's do this. Let's assume for a moment that God does not exist. But even in the evolutionary world, there are problems. Because isn't it survival of the fittest? Isn't there going to be death, and isn't there going to be the strong overtaking the weak? I mean, how do you deal with an issue like that? There's still going to be issues. And so faith in God does not remove you from suffering and evil, but it does give you the tools to walk through pain and evil. God does not simply sit on a throne and tell us as followers of Jesus, just deal with it. No. The writer of Hebrews says it this way, chapter 4, verse 15, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin." Jesus was spit on, beaten, mocked, hung on a cross as a criminal, yet lived the perfect life free from sin. And it is that one that in the middle of our pain, in the middle of our suffering, in the middle of the evil of our world, we can take comfort in the fact knowing that we have a God that sympathizes with us, but not only sympathizes, he walks with us in the middle of it. And yes, I'm closing. Tim Keller says it this way, is that suffering can refine us rather than destroy us because God himself walks with us in the fire. That's good news. That the God of the universe would walk with you in the middle of your pain and suffering. Now, on this side of eternity, we may not have all the answers to all the questions that we have. We may not have all the answers of the challenges of life, but we can rely on the fact that we serve the God who is going to walk with us in the middle of those challenges. When we trust in Jesus, as Keller says, we can take comfort that he's walking in the fire with us. So I don't think it's an intellectual problem. And I don't think it's a problem of evil and suffering, because evil and suffering is going to exist with or without religion. Because I think that we are faced with a decision in our life. I think the world is faced with a decision. Do we believe in God or do we not believe in him? Now, I'm sure you've kind of seen what's going on in our world. If not, you've been living in some kind of like hole in the ground. But there's a lot of stuff happening. But among all the chaos, you know what's taking place right now? Young people are flocking to the church and to God. You remember it wasn't more than a few years ago that everybody was making fun of millennials and Gen Z. They're just lazy. They don't like to work. I always say that because I'm a millennial, and so watch your mouth. All right. But instead of saying they're lazy or they don't want to work or they don't, what if we start seeing people saying, hey, I want to be like Gen Z and Gen Alpha because they're pursuing the creator of the universe? What if there was a revival that happened in our city, our nation, our world, because young people had gotten so far to the edge of immorality and chaos, and they said, that's not the answer. There has to be more. There has to be more to life, and surely the secular world is not going to give us the satisfaction that we're looking for. If we believe him, and we trust his word, we model our lives after him. If we don't, we live our lives for ourselves. The choice is up to you. But you can trust this. If you're here and you don't believe in Jesus, you don't believe in the creator of the universe, you can trust that the Lord is going to continue to pursue you. He's going to keep knocking at the door of your heart. And one day, my prayer for you is that you will answer to the knock at the door of your heart. Would you bow your heads with me this morning?